Good afternoon. Welcome, welcome. So glad that you're able to join me this afternoon. I do apologize for the reschedule. This was supposed to be yesterday morning, and needless to say, that was a reschedule because there are critters, one of whom you can kind of partially see on my lap right now, because this couldn't happen without her. This is Ladybug, that you can partially see in the buggerito on my lap right now. But it's a good time of the afternoon. Well, or yeah, afternoon now. I did something else earlier this morning also, and just kind of wanted to have an informal conversation, I guess, about what I've been thinking about lately. This is a little more informal than some of the later conversations I think will be, because I want to talk about what I'm returning to, not just what I'm making, but kind of what keeps pulling me back. Because I don't really think creativity is something, or being creative or creating, writing, painting, pottery, any of those kind of things are things that you necessarily decide to do. It's more like things that knock so loud that you have to do them at some point. That's certainly how it got to be in my life, where I just kind of had to say to the larger professional world, the larger corporate world, I can't do this anymore. Uh, I don't have enough energy left over to do these creative things at the end of the day. There's not enough left in my cup, and they're too important for me. Um, and so, after years and years and years of kind of decades, really, of moving between creative work, teaching, systems projects, uh, curriculum development, uh, helping people, helping organizations, and then of course storytelling. I've recently started to really treat those various elements as if they are not separate anymore. That they're not separate elements of my life, that they're not separate elements of competing systems, but that they're converging and that they support each other. And so building a life that looks like that is very different after having spent, again, decades in a much more traditionally corporate focused environment. So what is this particular stream going to be about? What am I going to briefly kind of cover here? So I want to talk a little bit about kind of returning to and practicing what we call creativity. And I want to talk specifically because I want to talk about writing more in this case. Uh, Fiction versus nonfiction, because I'm looking at that right now. And looking at, I've been doing a lot of fiction recently after, kind of almost like I broke from all of those years and years and years of working in a very structured environment in which I did write nonfiction, um, all the time, every day, in the form of proposals, and in the form of curriculum structures, and in the form of learning design, and all sorts of different things. Very blatantly moved into, no, I am writing fiction. And then I'm now kind of looking back at some nonfiction. So a little bit about that. And then a little bit about creativity and it existing within systems, uh, and how that plays with neurodiversity and modern work and school environments. And yeah, this is a pretty short conversation, so we're going to do all of that kind of quickly, or I'm going to try to do all of that kind of quickly just from a high level. This is what's going on in my head, and I would love to hear from others around their thoughts, and if I'm on the right track or off track, and kind of thoughts and feelings on what I'm saying here also. Um, this is really just me kind of throwing down a map and letting other people see the map while I'm still drawing it, basically. Because I always liked working with it's the one thing about being a solo performer now and a solo entrepreneur is that there's none of my usual team to kind of throw things out at and spitball with. And I always really valued that. So I'm just throwing it out to the World Wide Web, I guess, to see what thoughts, feelings, opinions are as far as that goes. And the first part I want to talk about it is the idea that creative work does return in cycles, uh, because I do find myself, returning to, for instance, like right now, returning to writing. Um, but one of the things, and I think for folks who don't consider themselves creative, who maybe don't do a lot of creative work, it's easy not to, or think they don't do a lot of creative work. It's easy to feel like you're going to lose ideas. And it is really important to write stuff down, because goodness knows my memory is not what it used to be. But ideas and efforts don't fully disappear, and it is not unusual to have a lot of dormant projects lying around, because the creative process, creative identity, creative thought isn't linear. It doesn't just travel in a linear path, and that's why organizations, that's why businesses can struggle with real creativity, because it it can take time. It can take working on something and putting it down and letting it marinate sometimes, and then coming back to it. Sometimes it's just not the right time for a specific project, but you take it and you put it to the side and you just trust that I'm not going to trash it. I'm not going to garbage it. I'm just going to put it over here, and someday it's going to come back around. And I think examples of that, and these are kind of mundane examples, but they are examples. I have one of the like almost everybody's favorite painting. It always cracks me up, actually. It's in the bathroom over at our house. It's in the guest bathroom. Um, I think that's still where it is. But it's this rose that I painted, and I hated it. I straight up hated it. And it's not very good, frankly. The rose itself is just not very good. And I put it in a folder for like 5 years, and then I yoinked it out of the folder one evening because I was doing some just messing around with multimedia stuff and I wanted to experiment. And I did this experiment, and this was decades ago. This was 15 years ago at this point, or more than that. This is more than that at this point. Well, way more than that. And I slapped some glue on it and then threw some like really thin paper on it. Anyway, I did some stuff to it and everybody really liked it. And then a friend of mine built a frame for it. So now it's in a cute little frame and it's almost everybody's favorite, like one of their favorite paintings of mine. Everybody loves it. And it all started as this really crappy rose that I did that's just really poorly done. But I just kind of kept adding stuff to it. And again, it happened over literal, in this case, decades. Not maybe not the greatest example, but actually kind of a cool example because it literally sat around for decades. And that's how creativity goes. I know that businesses can't necessarily follow that exact model of letting something just sit around dormant for decades, but you do have to understand that whenever you say you want creativity or you want innovation, that that can be what it takes sometimes, that it is not just linear, that sometimes it's cyclical and then sometimes it's a wavy path and you kind of have to be okay with that if what you want is creativity, because that's part and parcel of creativity is that there, it's having lots of dormant stuff around. It's having lots of different ideas. It doesn't always look super productive all the time. Um, so I think that's really one of the things that I think about a lot when it comes to creativity. And then one of the other things that's been on my mind a lot is, I mentioned the fiction versus nonfiction and the way I almost in protest, really kind of in protest, went fiction all the way. So I very much left nonfiction all the time kind of environment and went into uh, I'm going to write fiction. But I think an important thing about fiction is fiction really is it's difficult to write. Um, Nonfiction, I find anyway, is it's a lot easier to return to. It's a lot easier to come and go from, to leave the conversation, like, when I was whenever I was working and going to meetings all the time and in a much more structured corporate environment, things were constantly interrupting you, but it was all nonfiction, and that's not that hard to do because nonfiction is probably a little easier to write. Fiction requires immersion. It's emotionally expansive. Nonfiction, you just re-enter the conversation, but fiction, you really have to get yourself fully into the world. I love it because it being fiction, lets you approach reality sideways. You know, it lets you look at emotional truth through metaphor, allegory. It lets you experiment and it makes that safe and it lets you play. And it lets you process the things that are frightening or intimidating or sad, in reality with our imagination in a way that can sometimes be too difficult to process if it's just nonfiction. I really find that a lot of fiction, really well thought out, well structured fiction is, it's philosophy wearing costumes. That's really, it's cool characters uh and neat costumes, but it's really amazing depth that lets you examine things in your environment and in your society that are really hard to look at. Um, and that's why so often fiction never, if you think back, and I would love to hear about stories that stayed with you, characters that never left you. But that's why so often those are fictional characters, because they let us get in to those emotional truths. Now that being said, the things that I find I'm interested in writing about fictionally are often very much the same things I'm interested in the real life. And so I do find that, I'm examining um m- modern systems, leadership, neurodiversity, things like that, even when I write fiction. And I'm leaning towards, in terms of what's next, while I do have, in terms of what next, some of it's going to be chasing down stories that are related to the fiction stories I am telling or have been telling. The trilogy, trilogy that features Mithrain, the story keeper's daughter, that is completely out now. And there are a bunch of stories up here. I know that's terrifying. Pardon me, that feature that world or characters within that world. Like I want to There's a whole story I wanna tell about Sashara, that all happens prior to anything in the Story Keeper's Daughter. Actually, it's how Omri and Sashara met. So, that's a whole book I wanna write. It'll probably be a little shorter than most of the Story Keeper's Daughter. I wanna write, of course, about Kale uh and Roland, and what happens when they're gone for those 6 months in book 3. So that, of course, needs to be a thing. The Fall of Lumarith, I wanna write that. So that's actually from Joy's youth, from when Joymond was not really a kid, but whenever he was very young, and his homeland was destroyed by the darkness. So I want to write about that, and that's up here already. And then of course I was talking to, and this is another conversation, but one of the reasons I want to do these kind of things, because I was just texting with an old friend and colleague who I value a lot, and she and I were having some conversations, and she mentioned that I should write young adult stuff, and I went, I would love to write some books about the Wren crew, the Wren Cove kids, and I think I'm gonna do some. I don't know if young adult's correct, because I think this would be probably more middle school aged. But I wanna write some that follow the Wren crew kids and kind of what happens with them. And so that's all from that series, and then there's a whole other series that's just getting ready to come out, that's the Hollow Places, and there's 3 of those that's are basically already written, and then 2 more that are kinda traced out and in progress. So needless to say, I got an endless amount. That all of that was way too many words to say, I got no problem coming up with fiction. I got no problem. This fiction. What I am really interested in doing and would love to have conversations with other people about to find out if I'm even on the right track is more nonfiction and getting back into writing on modern systems and neurodiverse brains, and why people who are capable struggle inside systems that were supposedly built to support them. Why do intelligent, capable people feel like they're struggling and feel like they are failing in even in systems that were supposedly designed to help them. And I really want to, having worked in the public school system, K through 12, and even having some experience with pre K, having worked in the university system from undergrad through graduate and teaching at that level, and then also doing training at the uh, postgraduate level or at the corporate level, really looking at those school systems and workplace systems and what we're doing to improve or not improve what we call the neurodiverse experience. And that's I'm almost at the point where I'm like, neurodiverse, there's the clinically, we first you have to we're not going to get into actually we're not going to define neurodiverse here. I do a whole session on that. I do whole classes on that. We're not going to do that here. Because I was getting ready to go off on a soapbox and do what we're not going to do that here. But anyway, so looking at uh you know, for starters, like the school systems, what are we doing? Um, we've got standardized expectations, the rigid pacing. We make all sorts of. I'm going to sneeze. I apologize. Whew. I'm going to do it again. Apologize. Whew. I think that's it. We're good. We make all sorts of assumptions around attention and how long people can pay attention and what attention even looks like. And that goes for the workplace too. Like attention means sitting here and looking at you. Uh, and that doesn't necessarily mean attention. Oh, hey, Ladybug. Pardon me. I can very easily be sitting here and looking at you and not processing a single thing you're saying. I can also be spinning around in circles on the other side of the room and actually hear and process everything and get it. And so we make lots of assumptions and have lots of biases about what attention even looks like. And then, this whole idea of compliance versus learning, and that goes for the workplace as well. If what do we really want? Do we want people to learn, or do we want them to just be compliant? Do we want them to check off a list? And the school systems are like that as well. Um, we also ask for more probably in the workplace, but school is like this too. Constant context switching of how am I supposed to act in this situation? Who am I supposed to be here? Can I be myself? Do I need to be somebody else? And boy, do I know that from the workplace. I spent was gonna say decades, and yeah, that actually is true, decades, in some sort of public work. So, being a teacher, a public school teacher, working for state government, and then working as a federal contractor. And there's some serious expectations around your behavior. And so there's also a lot of masking that goes on. So if you are neurodiverse, if you are a bit different, you are in those kind of situations doing a great deal of masking to make yourself seem normal. That's exhausting. Let me just, tell you right there. And then in workplace, and again, also in school, you've got that performative productivity where you're acting like you're productive, even if maybe you're not. You see that in the workplace in particular a lot. Of let me make it look like I am. Let me do something. Let me have things to do so that I have billable hours. But but is it really productivity? Is it really what needs to be done? Is it useful? Is it good? And of course, that's also in the school system because we see students all the time talk about busy work, and in particular, the people who really kind of have a moral issue with busy work are those who are neurodiverse. There's a real we, and I will go ahead and lump myself in there. We have a real issue with work that doesn't have, like, what's the reason for this? And of course, all of that leads to burnout. Um, because folks who are neurodiverse don't think synchronously. It's very asynchronous. We either can get into very deep focus or have very fragmented focus, but focus looks different a lot of times. It just looks different than typical. And so it might not be labeled as productive or focused because it might not look like what someone who is neurotypical or has been trained to look for neurotypical focus expects. It's easy to get overstimulated, and so much of the effort can then, because so much energy goes into masking and looking normal, and not just going, why are we doing all of this stuff that doesn't have a reason, that's just performative? All So much effort actually goes into all of that, that it's exhausting, like I said, but it's invisible because it's, if you are neurotypical, you're not feeling all of those things. And so I'm just interested in writing about and examining more, designing and supporting systems that better support everyone and not just neurodiverse individuals. That's kind of in the larger sessions I do, I talk about the curb effect and how it's uh these things very rarely just help the population that they're the curb cut effect, and they very rarely just help the population that they're designed for. And so many of the support systems are so much simpler than we think they are. It's clarity, predictability, flexibility. Flexibility is huge. Pacing, um, just reducing some emotional friction, making sure it's clear and giving people permission to work differently. Just not having this is the way we've always done it, and you have to work in this little box, and you have to use this specific way of doing things. That whole idea of, hey, you're trying to get this end goal. How you get there is how you get there. But making sure that people just kind of know the end goal, and if there's any particular rules to get there, that's great. But not not standing over the individual with specific, this is the way I would do it. Because really, it supporting different kinds of brains just does not typically require massive interventions. Oftentimes, it's just removing unnecessary friction. Um, and that's one of the things that I'm really, again, that's the other writing, and that's the other focus that I'm very passionate about and I want to return to. And that's one of the things I worked on or was working on substantially, uh, kind of in my professional life. One of the fears, and I would love to hear from you on this if you have this feeling, one of my, and fear is not the correct word, thoughts, is that the marketplace, I was looking for another word for that, but we'll go with marketplace, is that the marketplace is so saturated with that kind of conversation right now. Is it worth it? Or am I just one of the like a bazillion voices out there, you know? Um, so that would be the other part of that, is if it's kind of worth it to focus in on that, or if there are just so many voices in that space that it's flooded. And I just don't know. I don't know. I think I'm a unique voice, but yeah, that would be my only concern there. But all of this is of course why I circle back towards stories all the time, and towards the power of story, because even in that nonfiction, um, you're talking about still storytelling, still helping people navigate systems, identity, and belonging, and helping to be seen inside a system that maybe doesn't fully see the individual. And I would love to hear what stories have helped you understand yourself, whether fiction or nonfiction. What are those stories? Um, Anyway, so that's kind of, I was trying to think if there's anything else I kind of wanted to talk about. We're basically at 1 right now, and that's about as late. I kind of wanted this to be half an hour. So I think that's what I took note of, was what time it was. So I think we're probably pretty good. Um, I think my big thing here at the end is, I used to think that all of teaching, systems thinking, the storytelling I just mentioned, leadership, mentoring, all the different aspects of creativity, the curriculum design, just all of those different things were fragmented skills. They were different skill sets that I had that sat in different places. But I've realized over time that they are connected, and that they've always been connected, and that the real strength is pulling those things into kind of the same room together. I don't know what all of this becomes yet. So transparency and honesty there, but the direction at least feels honest and ethically sound. and like morally something that I can live with. So that is cool. And honestly, that's, those are signals that I trust. So we'll go with that. But I would love to hear your thoughts on some of these questions that I've posed. Um, you know, what does help you be creative? What are your thoughts on the directions on neurodiversity? Just kind of threw out here some of this has been very organic, so I can't exactly go back and look at a list of what the questions that I asked were. Whoops. But I could probably play back a transcript. But I would love, here's the last question. Here's a last question for you. If you get nothing else, what kind of support actually helps you function better creatively or professionally? So there you go. There you go. What kind of support actually does help you function better creatively or professionally? Because I think that's a big one. We get lost in a lot of other stuff. But what are things that actually do help you, that do change your performance, that do change the way that you think, that do change how you feel about your own creativity? And I would love to just hear that as much as anything. Anyway, thank you so much for thinking through all of this with me, just kind of on the fly. This is just the beginning of something, and the next session will be more of a teaching experience and learning experience, and less of a dump at the camera, or a question at the camera. Although I am intrigued to hear thoughts and feelings from all of you all out there. And folks, have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day or evening. And let's keep in touch.